Yeah, folks, it's time for our final card review for the Across the Timeways Mini-Set. Today we got a new legendary, which you can see here behind me. We've got the new Death Knight Imbue hero power. It's a passive. So we're going to talk about that, some neutral cards, a handful of other little stuff. But for now, let's go ahead and kick things off with End Time Murozond. This is a big old 9 mana 4/6 with Battle Cry. Fill your board with random dragons, fully heal your hero. Now that's an insane card, right? If you stop exactly right there, if you only read 2 of the 3 sentences, that's an insane card. You get this giant board full of stuff. You get a RENO style effect that's fully healing your hero. The problem is that third sentence, skip your next turn. That one's a little tougher, and that one leaves you with a lot of questions about, can this card be worth it? We know so often that denying your opponent a turn, when you get to go twice in a row, stuff like old school Quest Mage, we've had Zarimi Priest Dragon stuff, right? That's pretty much always a death sentence for the opponent when you manipulate that effect to your gain, right? Like you have Zarimi Priest, you kill them. Quest Mage, you kill them, because 2 turns is enough to like set up a big board and kill them. So the question then becomes, when you flip that around and you give 2 straight turns to your opponent, you're basically playing the Quest Mage quest from way back in the day for them. They're getting 2 straight turns. You're playing Zarimi for them. Can they win the game every time with those 2 quests? Or perhaps even alternatively, if they don't win the game outright, have you gotten yourself further behind by playing Murozond than you were initially? Like, if you're playing this, you're probably in a dire spot because you desperately need some healing. Fill your board with dragons. I don't know. I will say, it's happening against random decks that don't necessarily have the same tools for development that a deck built for that would. Quest Mage was built for that. Zarimi Priest is built for that. They can make sure they're killing you with those setups. The opponent's going to be kind of doing it in a scrappy way. They're not going to be doing it on demand. They're not going to have a deck built for it. Their hand might not be right. I think there will be scenarios where you come out of that actually alive. On top of that, the Murozond board is pretty likely to have a taunt here or there. So, they might actually have to deal with like cleaning up some taunts. It's not like they can just develop 3 or 4 big things and then hit you in the face. They also just, you're fully healed. So you've got like 30 health to work with. So maybe 30 health, a couple taunts, maybe 10, 15 health and taunts. It's like, man, can they really deal like 45 damage in total? Some decks, like, yes, they'll have some combo or whatever. They'll execute their win condition and you will die. Maybe that would have happened anyway, though. Murozond wouldn't have changed your fate much. Other decks, particularly, if you've managed to get to turn 9 against an aggro deck, you've probably kind of won anyway. But, even mid-rangey decks might start to run out of steam a little bit. Stuff like Dragon Warrior, I'm thinking about, like, maybe this would actually stabilize against a Dragon Warrior. They'd run out of steam. This would give you a little bit of a window of recovery or whatever. Avoid some burst damage. And then, like if they've chipped you down a bunch and they're looking to hit for a final 10 or 15, heal up, another 20 or whatever off Murozond. Maybe they don't have that reach. They can't get through the board effectively. I do think there is actually a chance that this creates that stabilization. But at the same time, I know how lethal Hearthstone is. I know how scary it can get. So can you set up a situation where you can like safely play Murozond? There's other ways to manipulate this a little bit to have like some backup plans. Like, Death Knight has the little thing that resurrects you. There could be like secrets that you have in play that help support your Murozond as well to help you like get through a turn, right? There's other ways to give this a little bit of a boost potentially, but there's other ways to just be defensive and win games and run big crazy 9-drop bombs. There's opportunity costs running this card as well. So I'm actually a little bit torn on this one. It's hard to say this is ever going to be good just because that, giving your opponent 2 straight turns is so often a disaster. I think you could scrape by sometimes though. It's just like a question of then like, is it worth it? Does a deck want to scrape by or do they just want to do something bigger? I think this one probably gets cut more often than not, but particularly right after rotation, I'm curious if a deck can't just kind of weave this in and hope for the best because they just need some big bombs in their big control deck or whatever. And this is one of the few that's available and therefore it actually gets played. Moving on to another neutral card here. This is the Crumble Crusher, an 8 mana 8/6 dragon with Battle Cry. Destroy a random enemy minion, location, and weapon. So basically just crush and crumble their battlefield here, hitting everything. Location destruction in particular, maybe a little bit underrated right now. People don't like running, like that one location destroy card because it's just like, it's only going to hit sometimes. But we've seen so many really powerful Elise locations. I'm almost surprised that hasn't become a tech card. Maybe it's just a little too all in. You would maybe ask yourself, like, okay, since this is doing more things, it's not all in on locations, it still has additional upsides. Is this kind of a catch-all tech card? The problem for this one, right, is just 8 mana is so expensive. You'd have to have another hook on this card, which maybe a dragon deck is that other hook where it's like, I just need some big dragons for my dragon warrior or whatever. You could maybe toss one of these in. But I feel like on 8, by the time you play this, they've already got 2 hits off the Elise location. Whatever weapon you care about is already live. It's already smacking you. It's just like 8 is probably too much. If this were a 5 mana card with like tiny stats, a 5 mana 2/2 or something, right? Wouldn't feel very flavorful. Certainly would feel a lot more competitive because you could catch those cards when they matter. So in essence, like, even though this is doing a lot, it kind of gives me old school like Patchwork vibes, even though Patchwork was more about destroying resources. Sometimes Patchwork felt safe to play just because you knew you were getting that minion flip on board. Kind of gives you those vibes, but probably not worth it. Probably an absolutely busted, insane arena card if I had to guess. But I think in standard, just too prohibitively expensive for what you need it for. So next up here is Omen of the End. This is a 5 mana 5/5 dragon. Battle cry: if your deck is empty, destroy the top 5 cards of the enemy deck, which like really fun idea in theory, right? Like I love the idea of like burning through your deck. We've also had like Wheel of Time stuff, not Wheel of Time. That's a book. Wheel of Death stuff, I guess. Right, a couple things there that like, you could do that and you could delete your opponent's stuff. Problem is, of course, right, like you're just trying to equalize where you're already at. You're already in a spot where you don't have any stuff, and 5 cards for them is probably not going to be everything anyway. So are you really achieving a goal there, right? Like the condition basically here is so crazy restrictive in that you have to get to this game state. This thing's just sitting dead in hand forever, and then you've kind of only sort of hurt the opponent. They're probably going to have plenty of resources left. Plus right now, of course, Skill Jaden could just come along and say, just kidding, I've got cards again anyway. So like, look, fun idea, super cool. I'll try to play with this. This sounds like a fun deck, especially if you like Shadow Step these or something. You can do some really cool stuff with Rogue. But in essence, I just don't think it could ever really be a competitive card. Next up here is the Prescient Slither Drake, a 7 mana 6/9 dragon. This has elusive, and it costs 3 less if you're holding another dragon. So dragon in hand, this is a 4 mana 6/9 elusive. Nice stat line there. I'm actually a little intrigued by this card. This one's right on the border for me because a 6/9 is big for 4, obviously. It's not so crazy big that would be worth it in and of itself, though, right? Like, these days, it's just like we have crazy things going on. But with elusive, you start to look at it a little more. Like, is there a way to play off of this elusive? Because it's very likely this thing sticks going into a future turn. Can this be like, I don't know, an onboard buff target or something, or have some kind of dragon synergy on board? Like, is there any way to somehow manipulate this after the fact because it has so much survivability or stickiness? Or is that 6/9 in some way usable? Can you give this like taunt, to make those stats actually more impactful? Or is it something the opponent can just kind of slide past and ignore? And then suddenly, you're trading your 6/9 into 3/3s for the next 3 turns or whatever to barely stay alive, right? That's where you get worried, is that like, if you don't make this a like centerpiece of interaction in some way, the stats end up being kind of ineffectual. I mean, you could say, hey, I'm an aggressive deck and I'm just going to get a 6/9 down and start hitting them for 6. That would be a way to make the stats more immediately impactful. But then it's like, well, what kind of dragon deck are you playing that's super aggressive in that angle? We just don't really see much of those. I mean, maybe something like Zaremi Priest historically would fit that bill, but I don't know if they really need this either. So it's like, I really want to root for this because the 4 mana 6/9 is pretty cool. Elusive is a great keyword in some cases to deny, interaction on it. But I just don't think the game will operate through it enough to really be worth it, sadly. All right, so next up here, let's move on to Finality, a 3 mana spell. This one draws you an undead, so you've got an undead tutor, and you imbue your hero power twice. We can also see here the imbued Death Knight hero power. It is a passive hero power. The first undead you play each turn gains +1 attack, and of course that +1 attack is going to increment up with imbues. So even after Finality, right, you've already incremented it up to 2, and then 4, 5, whatever, you're going to be at some point playing some undead with like 6 or 7 attack or something, which would be really, really great with charge minions, but it's probably going to be hard to get a charging undead, particularly because the one you already had on your hero power is now gone. Which I will say Death Knight's hero power is pretty great in the era of Elise, where they just always copy it and like hit you for 5/5 or 10/10 or whatever with charge. So kind of sad maybe to lose the Death Knight hero power in this current meta anyway. But you know, I do think like the stacking aggression on this becomes annoying for opponents at some level. Like, man, they just keep playing guys with 10 attack, and it's like, I just like, maybe it's not that hard to deal with them all, but like, do they eventually fall over to all the dudes with like 10 attack? And maybe you're creating copies, and maybe you're, you know, I don't know, maybe it's just like a bunch of rush minions trading up, right? Like, there's a lot of little ways to maybe make those stats more impactful. That said, it is just attack at the end of the day, right? It's not a full buff on the undead, and I think like opponents are just going to navigate that, right? Like, without the health scaling, there's going to be little trades they can take, little removal, AoE and stuff will still clean all this up. So like, how do you really turn those stats into impact? I think that's going to be challenging. On top of that, you know, finality here is kind of like an undead tutor, of course. I was looking at like Talanji and Bwansamdi. You can draw your fabled cards off of your finalities. That's really nice, right? But then it's like, well, you want to have a lot of undead in your deck potentially to benefit from Blessing of the Infinite, particularly because it's play, not summon. So it's like, well, you don't really want to use this as a tutor then, probably, because then the hero power kind of sucks. Like, I guess you could if you're okay to give up your hero power in a Bwansamdi deck, but then it's like, well, the hero power side of it's not worth much, and then you're spending 3 mana to just tutor a single card. That, again, doesn't feel great necessarily. So, I don't know, man. Like, something about this just feels a little clunky or weird to me. I don't really know if this hero power pays off enough. You know, raw aggression like that can stack up over time. It can get there. But I'm not convinced that like a deck that's wanting to do that is wanting to play a 3 mana spell that just draws you a card, right? It's like that kind of deck needs to overwhelm in the mid game if they're going to play things like this, which it's going to be harder for those stats to do that at that stage. So all in all, I just don't think this hero power is quite rewarding enough. Now, that said, we are going to get here another Imbue card for both Rogue and Death Knight. So I wanted to bring back up the Rogue Imbue here, Blessing of the Bronze. Remember, this one gets you a random minion from another class that's cost is then discounted. The Jagged Edge of Time is a 3 mana 3/2 weapon that will imbue your hero power. So a 3 mana 3/2 weapon, like, that's totally fine, you know, not crazy competitive or anything these days, you know, not even as good as the old school Fiery War Axe. But if you're going to run an Imbue deck, this certainly feels like a fine piece of that. I mean, it's certainly not a sacrifice here to slot this in. The problem, as we talked about with Rogue and now with Death Knight, is I don't really think either of these imbues are actually compelling enough to make it worth it for the deck. Jagged Edge of Time does line up a little bit more with an aggressive deck for Death Knight. Doesn't really necessarily align yourself with random minions for Rogue. So it's like, again, fine, but not like a synergy fit or anything. But at the end of the day, just are the hero powers good enough? I don't actually think so, which means probably Jagged Edge of Time just gets ignored because there's obviously going to be other weapons available to Rogue and Death Knight they run that have their own plans. And this actually would be a downside risk if you wanted your other hero power, I guess. So, I wouldn't be totally shocked if Rogue just said like, hey, I need some value. I'm going to toss in a Jagged Edge of Time just to give me this button I can press every turn for a little bit of extra value. A lot of decks actually in classes would probably like that better than Rogue, though. Like, I could see a priest or a warrior or somebody doing that just to have an infinite value button. Rogue, historically, not the kind of class that does that. Traditionally, they're more about, you know, game plans, doing fast, crazy things, not trying to find infinite value. So maybe Death Knight, though, oh no, Death Knight doesn't get that hero power, you idiot. So no, Death Knight gets this hero power, which is like the aggressive hero power, which doesn't line up as well either. So yeah, at the end of the day, maybe a Rogue value button is okay, but everything else I think is going to suffer. So our final card of the mini set here is the Wicked Blight Spawn. This is another dual class card for Rogue and Death Knight. It is 4 mana, 4/3. It's an undead with Reborn and Death Rattle. Equip a 1/2 dagger. If you already have a weapon equipped, give it +2 attack instead. So number one, a 4/3 body and a 4/1, kind of that old school piloted shredder vibe here for like a sticky kind of aggressive 4-drop, but also, you know, you get this dagger, and if both of these die, of course, you kind of end up with a 3/2 dagger because the first one equips the dagger, the second one then buffs the dagger. So, you know, a piloted shredder that equips a Fiery War Axe. Are you kidding me? 2015 Hearthstone or 2016 or whatever. absolutely shaking in its boots. This would be the greatest card in the entire game in that era. I actually think it maybe still looks kind of good even in this era for Death Knight in particular, who cares about bodies, reborn, death rattle, undead. Like, I know the weapon side of this is the sort of rogue part of this card, but I think the things I'm really excited about on this one are really all tied to Death Knight. I don't really think rogue would be able to make this work very well. We have in the past seen some rogue death rattle decks where you manipulate death rattles, get extras. If that came back, maybe rogue takes another look at this, because you get some like pretty big attack weapon attacks, like chaining up or whatever, if you got multiple hits on the death rattle here. But at least for what we know today, I think this looks a little bit more interesting in Death Knight, where they're probably happy to get a couple bodies and a 3/2 weapon out of this, maybe even have their own death rattle bonuses, right? But few different hooks there, corpses, undead, aggression, all make sense to me. So I actually think this looks like a really solid card in Death Knight, with maybe some, you know, fringe potential in rogue if they ever return to death rattle stuff. So all that said, let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. End Time Murazond is a 3-star card. Crumble Crusher is a 2-star card. Omen of the End is a 1-star card. Prescient Slitherdrake is a 2-star card. Wicked Blightspawn is a 4-star card. Jagged Edge of Time is a 3-star card. Finality is a 2-star card. And there you go. I ended on Finality this time around. How beautiful. Genius execution here. But yeah, that's it for the Across the Timeways mini set. I think we ended up with only one 5-star card this time around. I don't know. Maybe some 4 stars, though, that get some play and make some impacts. Curious what you guys think about the mini set here. I will say none of the legendaries like really jumped out at me, I guess, as far as like power levels concerned. We had the Quest, which kind of intriguing in Hunter. Murazond here, I think really not good right now. Maybe, like I said, post rotation becomes very, very bottom of the deck kind of card, you know, card 28 or something, for that like kind of low 3-star rating basically. What else did we see? Morchi or whatever, Chromie's alt is like kind of shaky. The Demon Hunter card seemed like the most promising to me, but even it doesn't seem like crazy push or anything. It just seems kind of solid. I think that one got 4 stars. So yeah, I don't know. I guess not expecting crazy results out of this mini set, but maybe, you know, 4, 5, 6 cards pop in a decks here and there and make some impacts, I guess. But we'll see. We'll know soon. We'll play this as soon as the cards are out, try some decks out. We do have some fun stuff to try for sure. Even End Time Murazond looks pretty fun in the scheme of things. So all that said, share your thoughts down below. Thanks so much again for watching. And until next time, game on.